Thanks for joining us on Capitol View. I'm Fred Martino. Higher education is in the spotlight in Illinois and across the country. Universities everywhere are preparing for changes in the number of high school graduates and the increasing cost of education. Full disclosure, WSIU is licensed by Southern Illinois University. Today on the program, I am very pleased to welcome SIU System President Dan Mahony. President Mahony, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, well, thank you for having me today.
Good to have you here. And, I do want to begin with how SIU is preparing for something that many of our viewers have heard about. In a recent article, the Chronicle of Higher Education wrote, the consensus view is that America will hit a peak of around 3.5 million high school graduates sometime near 2025. After that, the college-going population is expected to shrink across the next 5 to 10 years by as many as 15 percentage points. So, the question, of course, is how is SIU preparing for that? And what has already been done at campuses that have already seen some large declines in enrollment?
Yeah, and that's one thing I would kind of start with is we've already seen nationally declines even before the enrollment cliff. So even before we get to that point, we've seen that kind of decrease. And we knew this was coming for a long time. You look at birth rates 18 years ago, and you can kind of figure out the trends. And so it's not that hard to see what was coming. And so we've been doing a lot of different things. We actually have a white paper that I worked on with the chancellors, and then we presented to the campuses this year, talking about different strategies that we could use to grow enrollment in an environment which is actually probably working against that, and a number of different things, certainly focusing on increasing retention rates for students. So rather than just focusing on recruiting new students, retaining the students we have, there's certainly some ability to do better on that. We actually just had a retention retreat recently and had sponsored by the Lumina Foundation. And then we're going to do a lot of work with our faculty on some things we can do on that. Improving transfers and the ease of transfer is something that I've really been passionate about for a while. I think SIU Carbondale has really led the way with the Saluki Step Ahead program, which makes it very easy for community college students to move to the universities. We're looking at things we can do with our financial aid and different scholarship programs. I will say that's one of the things that's probably the greatest myth out there in higher education, that it's getting more expensive. Actually, if you look at what students pay, it's actually getting less expensive over the last 10 years. And a lot of that has to do with the competitive marketplace and the financial aid packaging, but we need to be a little bit better about how we do that in order to meet the needs of our students. Focusing more on the fact that the demographics of our students are different. They're increasingly not white. They're increasingly international students, and that takes a whole lot of different recruitment strategies we traditionally have done. We're also focused on kind of growing and expanding some of our destination programs. The programs actually pull students in specifically for that program. When you look at Carbondale, aviation, automotive technology, mortuary science, or those types of programs. So what can we do to expand those? And also really looking at new populations, and particularly adult learners and adult working learners. Right now, we're focusing on developing the SIU system online, which will allow students to take classes from either campus much easier. We've actually been doing this for a while. I actually teach a class that has students both from Edwardsville and Carbondale. So we've been doing it some, but really expanding that with the idea that some of the people coming back will want to be able to find online classes at one of our campuses as easy as possible in order to move forward to graduation. So a lot of different strategies that we can use that will counteract, and not that we're going to stop focusing on high school seniors. We certainly will do that. There's a whole lot of strategies we've been using with them, but really we need to expand who we're going after and how we're kind of building those enrollment numbers.
Sure, and we'll delve into online education a little more coming up. Of course, funding for higher education is a major issue. A state commission, as you know, says that public universities in Illinois are underfunded by about $1.4 billion. The Commission on Equitable Public University Funding includes legislators and representatives from public universities and advocacy organizations. What did you make of their report, which also addresses equity in funding?
Yeah, and I was involved not only on the commission, but I was on the technical working group. So I was involved in the weeds, really, of putting together this funding formula. So I'm pretty familiar with it. I also spent a lot of time looking at the history of higher education funding in Illinois, in part because of the controversies over how Edwardsville and Carbondale were funded, and went back and really historically we've the funding model we have today was based more or less on enrollment back in the 1970s. And then we just went up or down a certain percentage every year without really looking at what has changed and certainly not focusing on equity. So I think one of the things that's interesting is I think all the universities agree that there's a need for a new formula, that the current formula, the historical based model, has not worked well for a bunch of different reasons. The second thing that we're all focused on is that it should address equity. And in my mind, that's really closing equity gaps, improving college going rates, which back to what we just talked about, it's not just that you have a certain number of high school graduates, but what percentage of them are going on to college and which percentage of them are not, even though they're qualified and may even have a desire to. So how do we actually pull them in to higher education better? And then once they're there, retaining and graduating those students. So how do we close equity gaps, and how does the funding model actually help us do that? The model that they developed is still a work in progress, and even in the report, they identify a couple outstanding issues. So I think it'll take us still some time to get to a final model, but I'm optimistic in the next year or so that we will get to a different model that will focus again on closing those equity gaps and really tie funding to the realities of higher education today.
Sounds like we may have a follow-up interview maybe in the year to come, and we can talk about that if it is indeed accomplished. Recently, SIU Day at the Assembly highlighted a number of efforts in Springfield. I want to start with something that folks should be aware of, the Illinois Tutoring Initiative. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and that came out during the pandemic. So there was federal funding that came to states to basically help improve student learning in a variety of different ways. And one of the ways that Illinois chose to do that was to work with universities. And both of our universities were part of it, but several universities, Illinois State and others, were part of it as well. In fact, Illinois State really took the lead on it. And what we did was we trained a bunch of tutors to work with students who were identified in their school districts, and it's usually school districts that had probably more impact from the lost learning. And they identified students who really needed the most support, particularly in areas like math and reading. And what we have found is it was highly successful. So in math, I think it was 90% of the students reached their goals. Reading was 80% of those who participated in the tutoring program. The problem is the money for that runs out. That was all based on COVID relief money that came from the federal government. So a lot of us, I think, would like to see the program continue, but we'd have to find the funding to support that. So that's part of what they were talking about yesterday, is where that additional funding may come to keep that program going. But it's been successful. School districts are very happy with it, and it's been, I think, great for our students, many of whom were the tutors who worked with those students in the K-12 environment.
Okay, well, another thing we want to make some more time for now. You addressed this. SIU in Carbondale and in Edwardsville both have programs for online education. And the extended campus at Carbondale also includes programs located in other places other than the main campus. Where do you see online education going as part of the services offered by SIU?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing now in higher education in general, but certainly for us at SIU, is this expansion of how we provide classes. So, moving, not that we're abandoning the traditional classroom, we'll still have those. And certainly as you look at some of the programs we have, as I often say, you don't want to train a pilot online. That's not going to be very successful. So there's certain programs where we're still going to be face-to-face and almost need to be. But there's a lot of programs where there's more flexibility, and we now are expanding our online offerings in a lot of different ways. I actually teach online myself. And I will say before COVID, myself included, very few of us had that experience. And right now, a lot of our faculty now, one of the upsides of that experience was we all learned to teach online and got more comfortable with it. And so now a lot of what we're doing is saying, okay, what do these students need? What fits their life? And how do we provide the education that they need in the ways that they can attain it? And as I mentioned earlier with the SIU system online, that's a way of really collaborating across the system and providing those online students with as many opportunities as possible. But
Yeah.
again, we still have the extended campus options too. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, some things are better in person rather than online, and many would argue that the eclipse is one of those things. SIU Carbondale is once again hosting a major event for the April 8th eclipse. This was a big event in 2017 too. Tell us about Eclipse Day at Saluki Stadium, which will also be broadcast on the WSIU stations.
Yeah, it's not even just Eclipse Day, it's Eclipse Weekend. I think there's things going on in Carbondale. I know at least from Friday on, and we're heading there on Saturday, and a lot of different activities to choose from. But Eclipse Day will still be at the stadium as we were last time. Tickets are still available for that. And there's a lot of information available at eclipse.siu.edu for people who are interested either in the tickets or other activities going on. But we're in a very unique position in being that in the path of totality, and really one of the best places that you could view the eclipse will be in Carbondale. And I think it's about 4 minutes that experience will take place, but it'll be a pretty amazing experience for those of us who are there. And it's interesting. I always say you don't always. Sometimes you do things and you have something happen because you were smart, or sometimes you just get lucky. We're just lucky that we happen to be in the path, and that we become kind of a center of attention for a lot of people. So we'll expect a lot of news media, not just locally, but nationally, to be coming to Carbondale, a lot of visitors again coming to Carbondale, all of which is good for the city. It's good for the university. It will give us attention that, frankly, we wouldn't get in another way. But it's also going to be a really exciting event to be part of. I wasn't there last time. That was before I arrived at SIU, but everything I heard from the last experience, it was pretty amazing. And I think this one's going to be even better.
It'll be exciting. All right. And wherever you are, make sure to wear the approved glasses so you do not hurt your eyesight. We've been giving those out at SIU Carbondale and certainly in various places, so you can find them. Make sure you do that. We want to always say that. I want to talk about a number of other programs now that were highlighted during SIU Day. First up, community justice and racial equity. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, we have created recently the Southwestern Illinois Justice and Workforce Development Campus, and at the old Lindenwood campus in Belleville. It was one of those, every so often you have an opportunity. There was a facility there that wasn't being utilized anymore, and a desire to do something valuable for the communities in the area, something where the universities and our students could get a good experience. And so we've developed a number of different programs. SWIC actually has some programs there. Carbondale does. Edwardsville does. We're working very closely with Illinois State Police, which has this forensics lab right next to that campus. So Edwardsville actually developed a master's in forensic science that will help deal with the shortage of workers in that area. Our law school at Carbondale has some students who are there working with the local justice system. But a lot of our goals also kind of go back to our Office for Community Engagement and reaching out to communities and providing support in different ways. And I've certainly heard from a lot of the communities a desire to find ways to reduce crime rates in the area. And so working again with the university, with those communities, as well as with the state police, we think there's a number of things we can do to help improve the situation there.
SIU Day, as you know, also highlighted the Office of Veteran and Military Services. Let's talk about efforts to increase opportunities for service members and for veterans.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I think sometimes people just think about race or religion or whatever, but veterans is a big part of that. And really, when we talk about DEI, it's recognizing that different groups need different types of support, may not have that same feeling of belonging, just particularly with veterans. I've had a lot of them in the classroom. They're coming back later in life, haven't kind of gone directly from high school. And so trying to find their way can be a little difficult. Also, they need support sometimes in accessing the benefits that are available to them specifically. So we've put a lot of effort and working with our veterans and providing that sense of belonging, the support that they need, assuring that they're successful as well. And I will say that's one where you won't find anybody who doesn't think that that's important and should be a priority. And so it is one that I know a lot of our legislators are very passionate about, and we're very passionate about. And we've got some great people working in those centers to help support the veterans. Again, usually veterans themselves. So they understand the experience firsthand of what our students are going through. But it's something I always get really excited about and love to visit the centers on the campuses and see some of the work that they're doing.
Absolutely. Very, very important effort for sure. Well, in our remaining time together, I want to talk about some efforts that are underway with another one of our partners here at WSIU. That's the SIU School of Medicine. Amazing things happening there every day. We try to highlight some of those on the station. I want to start with the Behavioral Health Workforce Center. Many people have probably not heard about this, but they should know about it.
Yeah, and one of the things that they've really worked on is working closely with the state and looking at what are the priorities and much like I talked about earlier with community engagement of, really working with the people in our communities, working with people at the state level and identifying where there's needs. And the behavioral health workforce is one of those things that was really identified as there's just not enough people in the workforce. And, what can we do to help support that? And this is an initiative that really has a lot of partners at the state level. University of Illinois Chicago is also a partner in this. SIU School of Medicine was chosen to really lead this effort. And it's really all about, educating and training more people to go into the workforce, retaining those who are already in there, and getting support for people who need behavioral, need mental health counseling or whatever it is across the state. And that's particularly true for rural areas, which usually have even a greater lack of support in that area. And so we're trying to expand the workforce as best we can, working again with all of these partners. But this is a big state priority. I know they're putting a lot of effort and resources behind it, and we're just happy to be taking the lead on that and working on something that, again, is really important for everybody across the state.
Okay. Well, the School of Medicine also has a farm family resource initiative. Of course, Illinois is a big agricultural state, so I'm really curious about this. Bring us up to date.
Yeah, and sometimes this is, I think, somewhat related to what I was talking about earlier. You need to look at different communities at the university, but you also need to look at different groups outside the university and meet their needs in sometimes different ways. And one of the things we find with farm families is either because they're further away or because of some of the stigma, they don't reach out for help when they need it. And so the late Senator Scott Bennett really came up with the idea of the Farm Family Resource Initiative as a way to reach out to farmers, provide them the resources that they need, and make it as easy as it can be. Also, allow it to be confidential and make them feel safe about reaching out for help and support. And so it really started as a pilot with a few counties. It's now expanded statewide. We're starting to do kind of online group sessions as well. And so again, some of this is virtual, meets the needs of the farm families. But if anybody needs help, if you call 1-833-FARM-SOS, so 1-833-FARM-SOS, we can help get you the support you need. But we're very excited about the fact that this thing really has grown in a big way. And we think we're providing a really much needed resource for those working in the agriculture industry in the state, which again, as you mentioned, is a really big thing here in Illinois.
It's great to hear about that. One of the most memorable segments that I've had a chance to do in my career came here at talking to folks at the SIU School of Medicine in something related to agriculture, a gentleman who had an injury and his life was changed dramatically by surgery to help repair that injury. At the SIU School of Medicine, there are some unbelievable things happening there. that folks should know about. And that particular episode is Eye on Education, and it looks at this reconstructive surgery that goes on at the SIU School of Medicine. Truly groundbreaking stuff, and so important to understand, even if you never personally need it, to know the importance of having that service in Illinois and that it's provided at the School of Medicine, for sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I will say, when I first interviewed for the job, I remember I met with Jerry Cruz, the dean of the School of Medicine, and he was telling me how great the School of Medicine was. And I was like, well, he's the dean. He's supposed to say those things. And I've been here now for a little over 4 years, and I found everything he said is true. And I hear that throughout the state, just constant positive feedback about the work being done at the School of Medicine, and so many stories like that of just fantastic work. And I will say, even in my own household. My kids live someplace else, but they come back here for medical care because it's so good here.
yeah.
So that just gives you some, even from a personal standpoint, I'm a big fan of what they're doing at the School of Medicine.
Powerful statement. Well, we have time enough for one more effort at the SIU School of Medicine. And this is a very important one, a growing challenge in our country with the aging population. There are more and more people facing Alzheimer's disease, and there is an Alzheimer's Center at the SIU School of Medicine. I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that. It's something I know you talked about at SIU Day, and it's an important topic, important thing for people to know about.
Yeah, it's the Dale and Deborah Smith Center for Alzheimer's Research that we have at the School of Medicine, and they've been doing work for a very long time in this area, and it really is focused on what can we do to prevent um, dementia and other related diseases, slow it down, cure it hopefully at some point, but through different research projects they have going on. They have millions of dollars of different research projects, frankly, going on with federal support to work on this, but it's also about treating patients. So I think it's about 2,600 patients a year that we treat at our Alzheimer's Center. So, again, this is part of our, working with people who need that support right now. But there's a lot that this is another area I think a lot of people are passionate at the School of Medicine about, doing work that can be impactful. I should point out the Simmons Cancer Institute is another one of those, but we have a lot of different areas at the School of Medicine where they're doing some really amazing work and research, but again, also working directly with patients.
Absolutely, such important work. We hope to highlight a lot more of it on our show Eye on Education, as we partner with the SIU School of Medicine to highlight not only the services and the education, but as you pointed out, the research that's going on there. There was another recent show we did on research at SIU School of Medicine on various issues with hearing. And again, a lot of reaction when we did that particular segment, people who didn't know that work was going on and didn't know about the role that SIU School of Medicine played in that. In our final minute here, I'm sure you get all kinds of feedback when you're out and about all over the region talking to people. And along with the challenges and managing it all, this really is a very exciting time to be in education, correct?
Yeah, no, it's definitely an exciting time to be in education. And I think it's an exciting time to be here. And we talked about the School of Medicine and the outstanding work they're doing. I get certainly very positive feedback about that. I think a lot of people are excited too about just what's happened, particularly on the Carbondale campus the last few years, where, a few years ago, enrollment was declining pretty rapidly. That has now turned around. We had, one of the best increases we've had in a very, very long time, I think 20 years this year. At the Carbondale campus. And again, a lot of those efforts we talked about at the beginning all played some part in that growth. But we're looking for better things this year and going forward. So I think there's a general excitement about where SIU is. And I think the campus is working together in a way that really wasn't happening as much before. We've got a whole lot of things, more than we can talk about today, of different initiatives where we actually have people on both campuses working closely together in partnership. And again, that's more than we had just a few years ago. So generally, we hear very, very positive things about, I think, where SIU is and where we're headed.
All right. Well, we appreciated you taking some time today to tell us about some of those things. Dr. Dan Mahony is SIU System President. Dr. Mahony, thank you again for being with us today.
No, thank you, Fred. Appreciate it.
Thank you as well at home. And for all of us at WSIU, I'm Fred Martino. Have a great week.